All right, it is time for TJRS. We are just about a week away from Christmas, the holiday season, and the spirit is upon us. Have the Commanders, are they naughty? Are they nice? Is it going to be a lump of coal, or is it going to be a playoff game underneath our Christmas tree? With that and a whole lot more, here's Riggo.
Yeah, I'll tell you, let's start with the Christmas. And I hadn't even thought of that till I sat down in this chair. It's a week away, basically, maybe a little bit and change, whatever. And I've already been wrestling with, I got nothing at Christmas time. I just got nothing.
Wait a second. You didn't go and cut the tree with the girls?
Oh, yeah. And Elise Marie's got the tree up, looks beautiful. And she's the one that's really the driving force behind it, because there's a couple of them. One of them Christopher Radko, that doesn't mean anything to you, does it? Well, he is the artiste of Christmas ornament designing.
Oh, my.
In fact, he sold his company several years ago. Then there was a non-compete. But he's back now. Lisa Marie's been buying Christopher Radko. I mean, I have no idea how much some of those ornaments are today. I mean, we're talking 3 figures.
You don't want to know.
It's over. Yeah, exactly. And but she started buying them way back in when we lived in New York in the late '90s. So it's like a parade. And of course, Coco and Hannah came over, and Lisa Marie does all the lights, and she does them. She learned it from the people at Saks Fifth Avenue up there on Fifth Avenue in New York City.
The best displays in the world.
I think they had,
Best displays in the world.
I think they had a seminar on how to light a tree. Oh. I mean, I forget. I'll be the dumb bastard that has to take it back down. I mean, I just end up, I got to unravel all these Christmas lights. And I don't know, Todd, there has to be... I think there's probably closer to 30, but I'm going to say 20 strands of lights. Now, the thing that makes this, which you would think, well, what's the big deal? She goes inside the very inside of the tree and wraps out. So it's just constantly, and it takes her probably 6 to 8 hours to actually light the tree, put the lights on, and it'll take me a couple hours to take them back off.
Damn. Your tree is always unbelievable. I will say this. Your tree is always unbelievable.
Yeah. And
freshly cut.
What's that?
You always go and get a freshly cut?
Yeah, as fresh as you can find. You never know what you're getting for sure. It's not like I'm what do you call it?
So, cut it down.
Well, I used to do that years ago when we lived in New York. You drive out and saw your own tree down in some of those places. It's kind of tough around here. I suppose you could drive over to West Virginia. I know there's some farms over there. Mm-hmm. And I think North Carolina, but I don't think I'm driving to North Carolina to get a Christmas tree. It's like, particularly when it's like, I'm not Scrooge by any stretch of the imagination, but I ain't Mr. Christmas either. It's kind of like, well, okay. But it's a reflective time of year where you think about your family and your friends, and I think that's all good. But the thing that vexes me the most is, what do I buy for everybody? I'm just sitting here, like I said, a little bit over a week from Christmas, and I got no shot. It's
straight cash, homie. Can't go wrong. Straight cash.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But I've been to that well so many times, you would think somebody's going, it's more cash. But you're right, down deep, I suppose it counts. But yeah, that's one of my biggest problems right now is figuring out what I'm getting people for Christmas now. Everybody in my family, with the exception of myself, of course, they've been nice. And me, there'll be a big truck pull in.
You got a lot of coal coming?
Straight from West Virginia. Peabody probably is the company that's going to bring it in. So we'll see what happens. I had the pleasure and the honor of attending the Army-Navy game on Saturday. Can you believe that?
What a great game. And I was glad to hear that you were going.
Yeah, I had an invite. They had a suite there where they had, now I think there's 61 living Congressional Medal Honor recipients. I think there's 61 living. And they had quite a few of them in this suite, and I was invited into that suite. It's kind of like, well, going to a college football game ain't real high on my list of priorities. But then again, you kind of think, I remember that it was kind of hearkening back to when I was a kid, and in the 50s and 60s, for some reason, that seemed to be a really big game. And I think it still is, don't get me wrong, but I've got, you go on and then you end up playing professional football for 14 years, you don't think much about it. But I remember playing at the Vet in Philadelphia, and veterans, well, no, what was it?
Franklin Field.
Franklin Field was right beside the Vet, and that's where for years and years they played the Army-Navy game.
Yeah.
But what struck me was you're in a room with guys that had some intangible, their spirit.
This is the Medal of Honor recipients.
Exactly. That those guys represent something. I mean, they're the best of human nature. I mean, you could say of America or the United States, but, they are, they're willing to put it all on the line. And, some of them were injured, some of them haven't been, like Audie Murphy, I think of him. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but he was, I think, he might have been the most decorated war hero of World War II. I'm not 100% sure about that. I thought I read that, but he went and he became, a movie star and all that stuff. And certainly the things that he did, and he was never injured, was pretty interesting. But yeah, it's just like you really, and which I had to tell him. I said, "You guys are the real deal." I said, I'm like what do you call it, a drugstore hero. I got nothing compared to you guys.
Come on, you dressed up on Sundays.
Like, I told one of them, I said, it's a lot easier to dodge a linebacker than a bullet.
Great line.
Yeah, and so I like I said, it was a very humbling experience is probably right, because you don't feel worthy to be in those kind of people's presence, really, because you ain't got that. Well, I take that back. If it's a family member, whatever, I don't know though, but that also kind of shows you what kind of a bond that the military people, what do you call it? How they feel about one another. They're willing to die for the next guy. That's a pretty interesting concept that I got to be honest with you, I don't think it's ever crossed my mind. Family, yeah, but when you're talking about, but that's what really, now when they say football is family, I don't think they mean the same thing as this kind of family. This is the real deal. And, for somebody to throw down their life for their fellow soldier, I just, like I said, I think that's the highest calling that you can find.
The code, the warrior code that they live by, that's part of the essence of who they are, right?
Once you sign on, it's like in for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah,
there ain't no.
It's pretty amazing. That's why we love this game too, John. Its popularity.
You mean the Army-Navy game?
Army-Navy game is off the charts. I mean,
just for example, the game was played here in Washington, D.C.
Well, they moved it around. They've moved it around from Boston to Philly. Cities bid on this.
Oh, and Washington did the same thing. My wife was part of the presentation committee that presented to the people, the other committee that accepts what towns. To me, now I'm just talking off the top of my head. I guess it's something but it seems like Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, I mean, this is kind of like you might say headquarters for the military.
It should be the permanent home game. Army, Navy, historical, what it represents, because 99.5% of those guys playing are going to fight and for our country,
right,
or stay in the program and not consider playing professional football. So they're the true student athletes times 10.
They're athlete students. I've always said that's put backwards. Student athletes, almost like the student's the adjective, athlete is the noun. I'm thinking, get that backwards. I think it's really they're athlete students, not student athletes. But getting back to what you're talking about, that when they come out of here, the college game has shifted so much, and the money is so great that people that are athletes now, that are football players, that think they've got a chance to play in the NFL, they will never be going to a military academy. Because
they're not recruiting them.
Exactly. And so now you have the Michigans and the Ohio States and the Alabamas and the Clemsons, and they're the people who gets all the talent. And so, like when Army played Notre Dame this year, they got shellacked pretty good.
I think by 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, and then I think Navy played. Did Navy play Notre Dame this year as well?
Yes, and got whooped.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying, I mean, you got to get. They got moxie. I mean, but that's the very thing we're trying. But I started out with by saying of these recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor that's who these folks are. They're not going to back down. They won't back down, and you got to give them a lot of credit because you got guys there that next year they'll be playing in the NFL, and I could see from where I was, and I didn't get I was doing a lot of talking during the game. I could see some of the players down there, and I saw the offensive linemen. They looked actually pretty good size, but I'm thinking, but that's the two naval academies. Let's trot out Alabama or Ohio State. Maybe they're not as big because these guys are really big.
The size restrictions at the academies.
What's that?
They have size restrictions. Their basketball.
Well, it would be for sure.
Their basketball team, because the Navy.
Well, they didn't when Dave Robinson.
They had to grant an exemption.
For him?
Yes, and then he grew an additional, I think, 4 or 5 inches while at the academy.
That's right. You're right. He grew out of it. But anyway, I had a great experience. The other thing I wanted to bring up was, which everybody knows when I left, it was in pursuit of red Chongo. I don't know how to describe this trip, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time on it. But let's just say Chongo somewhere right now is laughing.
He's still
laughing.
Undefeated.
He's laughing. He's laughing because it's so funny that the dumb hick from the East Coast who grew up in Chongo's homeland has lost his touch. He's just like, it just didn't work out. Now, I saw a lot of Chongo's relatives. But Chongo never surfaced this year. I think maybe I got to him. I don't have any idea. Usually, he'll give me an ass shot. In other words, it's like he shows his little rear end off. Basically, he's mooning me, and I can see the big rack from behind. Chongo.
I think he heard that you didn't drive this year. You took a jet, and he said, this guy might be serious this year. He's going to be well rested. He didn't do a 19, 20-hour drive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you never know. I hope that he's thinking about me anyway. But anyway, that trip was, I'm looking back on it thinking maybe I should have just stayed home and drank beer. I don't know. Anyway.
When in doubt. All right, well, I tell you who has not been drinking beers. Our guy, George Wallace.
Don't count on it.
We're going to check in with George. All right, John, as advertised, our buddy, WTOP sports director, George Wallace, and we'll talk about the Commanders. Quick recap on the Saints and where they're heading here in the final 3 games, important games.
I was going to say, George, I'm going to bring back the late Denny Green's comment, except it's going to be in reverse. Are they who we thought they are? Because, at the beginning of the season, I think, what was it, about 3 or 4 games in, people talking Super Bowl. It's the way it always goes, though.
I'd give them even 5 and 6, 3 and 4, and 5, 6, 7, yeah. Because that's when they went on their little run.
Was that when it was? Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But my point is, in fact, you're the one talking about there were people like, I don't know if they were odds makers or whoever saying, ooh, this team looks like they could be playing in late January.
Yeah. Yep. After about the 6th or 7th game.
But you know what? I mean, this is my observation. I'm curious to see what yours is. When it's all said and done, I think this team is who we thought they were. Without the, getting all giddy about those wins early on. And looking at them going, this is kind of the season I think everybody expect them to have. Actually, a little bit better, but not, unless they what do you call it, run the table here at the end. But, they've had a decent year, and there's no reason they shouldn't make the playoffs, but that's not a guarantee either.
No, and look, isn't it funny how we're arguing, or not arguing, but fans are really concerned about now how, they got win number 9, but they didn't look good doing it. We're talking about a 9th win of the year, which in the beginning of the year, if you had said this team was going to win 9 games, I don't know if many people would have believed you.
Right.
But I think to your point, it is probably who we thought. I mean, I think, there are some concerns. They don't seem to be playing their best football, and this is when you want to be playing your best football in December, and especially coming off of a bye. That's what concerned me a little bit more about Sunday. First half was fine. Found Terry McLaurin a couple of times. Should have had 2 more touchdowns. Okay, but you got to finish a game like that against a pretty bad Saints team. I mean, this team's lucky the Saints are pretty bad. I mean, that Jake Haener
really
couldn't
bad.
do anything. I mean,
they were so decimated, George.
Yeah.
Spencer
if Rattler
Rattler
starts that game, if he starts the game, maybe they don't win the game. So I'm a little concerned, though, heading down the stretch here in December, that they're not playing their best football. But again, I think that the fact that they're at this point now, and you're talking about scoreboard watching and who has to do what for this team to get into playoffs. If you had said that in the summertime, anybody would have taken it. But I think now that they have played some good football and you're at this point and still having some issues this late in the year, I think that's where fans are kind of like, wow, what's going on here? What kind of team is this really?
And I think that, and to your point, they are. I am going to say what they are. They are what they are, which is really they're a middle of the road team right now. I mean, because you have to look at their entire season to this point. The one thing that plagues all teams that don't do very well is inconsistency, and that's what they've been. That was what they were on Sunday. I mean, I'm going quite a ways back. That's what they did against the Chicago Bears at home. If you think about it, very fortunate to have escaped. Although I guess, and this is something I just caught, I didn't really realize it, that there was 4 extra seconds that the supposedly that they got, that the Saints got. Are you aware of this, Todd?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And somehow, that turned out to be a big outrage. I mean, it happens. Perhaps without that, it wouldn't have been. But that notwithstanding, they still did not play well. And to your point, George, we're into the middle of December. This is when it counts. This is where, as they say, the cream starts rising to the top. And right now, they're not heading that direction. And I think we'll get a much better idea on Sunday just exactly where this team is. I mean, a huge upset over Philadelphia would be, monstrous.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and just think about, you're talking about the other day, 1 2-point conversion and the Hail Mary. You're 2 points, 2 plays away from being, 7-7 or whatever now.
Yeah.
So, and I get it. That's the way the NFL is, and things have happened on the other side too. But I think, I don't know, maybe the fact that they were on the bye and they came out and didn't really play a complete game, I think for me that's a little more concerning.
George, what are you seeing and hearing from the locker room and the team now? Because they've got the injury bug is legit and is for real right now. And Jaden Daniels, I mean, the guy was running for his life back there. What did he get sacked? 7, 8 times?
8.
8. And the amount that he had to run. And even the TV commentators are starting to say, well, these are on Jaden, actually. He's kind of going back to pass, but he's still thinking run in the back of his mind.
He's got the rabbit, huh?
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing?
I think having Tyler Biadasz out Sunday was a big deal. The center, an illness came on Saturday, so he couldn't play.
Yeah, starting center.
Yeah, I think that was a big deal, and I think, and Dan Quinn tried to say, a couple of those sacks were basically he ran kind of lateral and was forced out of bounds, so they're considered sacks, but he wasn't really sacked. But he didn't have much time, and I think Andrew Wiley being back helped for sure. But look, Zach Ertz now has a concussion. You're still without Austin Eckler, so the offensive injuries are piling up, as you mentioned, and that's not. You just hope that Jaden can have enough confidence down the stretch here to do what he was doing before, stay in the pocket and run when you have to. I think what we saw Sunday was what we saw earlier in the year when he was kind of just, I don't want to say running scared, but he was hesitant because he knew the walls were coming in.
All right, so George, I mean, the good news out of all of this, preseason, they were picked to be dead last with the New York Giants. Anybody, there might have been 1 or 2 outliers, prognosticators that said, yeah, they may win the division, this and that. But they're kind of settling back in. Anybody would have signed up and taken 9 wins, to your point earlier. But now you get into, and this is the fun part, scenarios, right? They are in the catbird seat once again to control their own destiny. Philadelphia at home, Atlanta at home, at Dallas. Got a sneaking suspicion that final game in Dallas is going to mean something here. Now, they need to win 2 out of 3 to 100% secure, their playoffs getting in. I don't think anybody's expecting them to beat Philly. I think that would be, to your point, John, could be the rallying point, the rallying cry that we knock out one of the top seeds, if not the top seed, them in Detroit. So, 1 out of 3, there's a 42% chance they don't make the playoffs. So if they win 2 out of 3, then there's an 86% chance they'll be the 7-seed wild card spot. So it's fun that these last 3 games have some meaning.
Yeah, it's the Falcons game. Your old pal Kirk Cousins is going to come back here. That game's probably going to be flexed this Sunday night. Falcons are pretty bad. They look terrible against the Raiders.
John,
barely
you like
get out of
that?
that one.
You
with a
like
win.
that? You going to get your Kirk Cousins? You like that when they get flexed?
I get him mixed up with the other guy who butted the wall.
Gus
Farad. Gus Farad.
They're kind of, if you put them in a dark room, you would know who was who.
Oh, Gus would say, "Yeah, I know about $200 million more for Kirk Cousins."
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True. Things
But
worked out
they
well.
look. What you don't want is that last game against Dallas. And I know what Dallas is. That's fine. But to go on the road, having to win that game to get in the playoffs, it's just anything can happen. It's a road game. It's Jerry. Who knows? You just don't want it to come down to that. You want to hopefully.
That's a great point, George. Because
Can you imagine if it comes down? I think Jerry Jones is going to suit up for that if it comes down to that game.
he just might give it a shot. Yeah, I got to say that's an interesting scenario, and in some ways, you got to feel like. I don't know. I don't want to, cast any doom upon Sunday, but let's face the Eagles are one of the top teams in the league.
Yeah.
And they'll be ready I would think they'd be ready to play. I'm not saying that Washington can't beat them, so that means now you're down 1 game because we're doing scenarios. More than likely, you know what you're going to get out of Atlanta, but now you are literally hanging, by your fingernails, so to speak.
Right.
So, and just what you said, how many times over the years, Dallas, Washington, has one team actually been good and the other one not so good, and a game that's very important at the end of the season, the team that's not so good beats the team that is good. It's like,
It's uncanny how many times.
it's almost
It
automatic.
actually is more of the rivalry.
Yeah.
Because Dallas had no business beating them with Cooper Rush a couple of weeks ago, right? Came into Northwest and smacked them in the mouth. And the other thing about this Eagles game, let me tell you something. They are fighting for, against
Number
Detroit.
Get
For
that
number
bye.
1 seed to get a bye. Detroit is really banged up. How many guys they
And
are losing?
Minnesota.
They're dropping like flies.
And Minnesota now too only has 2 losses. So there's
Minnesota
3 up
nipping
top.
at their heels, so they have every reason to want to have that number 1 seed. So,
Well, it gets back to what
How
George
about
said
this?
earlier. Go ahead.
How about this scenario, though? And John knows better than anybody, it's tough to beat a team 3 times. Let's say they lose to the Eagles and you stay in that 7th spot and you go to Philly for a wild card game. What are your chances? Better at that time or Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah.
You're the player.
I don't know.
You're the player.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I would rather, if you're going to lose one of those, you'd want to lose on Sunday, which probably more than likely, I would guess, is going to happen.
Right.
Because,
Right.
and then, pick the game up if you end up. So you're saying there's a chance. Well, I guess there would
Yes.
definitely be a chance
Yeah,
that they'd end
because
up having to go to Philadelphia.
If they end up being the 2
Right.
seed. So it really does
Right.
get down to the Vikings that everybody is discounting, and they're kind of this unknown quantity that is 12-2.
And you know what? That shocked me today. I just happened to be going through the NFC Central or North, I guess.
Yeah.
And I went, the Vikings have only lost 2 games?
Yes.
I was stunned.
Yes.
Go figure. And they've kind of come out of nowhere in a lot of ways, right?
Unbelievable.
I mean,
With Sam Darnold, who was,
Sam Darnold.
was dead and forgotten and cast aside, and guys lighting it up. And his contract.
Yeah.
Talk about a guy that's going to get paid.
Yeah. And then of course he did it last year, but the kid in Detroit, another cast off.
Yeah, Mr.
So-
Goff.
Well, George,
And if
I
it
don't
weren't
know.
for the Lions, the Vikings would be the story. But now the Lions are so banged up. Montgomery's out. They have like 18, 19 guys. And they've been cruising to that number 1 seed. But I don't know now. I mean, those guys with Minnesota, that division's been crazy this year. And it's going to come down to the end with that as well.
Well, like I said, it gets down to who plays well in December, and when you don't have all your ponies on the field, it's tough to play your best football. But sometimes, these teams find a way to do it. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with what's going on in the locker room. Teams that feel good about themselves, I remember, it's been 40 years, but there was just a feeling like good stuff was going to happen, as opposed to, years before that, playing with the Jets, and you're going down to play the Pittsburgh Steelers in the early 70s. It's like, I don't have a good feeling about it.
It's kind of cold.
It's like the old saying, in the cowboy movies when somebody says it's quiet. It's really quiet, and the other guy's too quiet. It's the same situation. You get the picture.
Well, George, you better, the Eagles fans travel too damn well. I take it you'll be at the game on Sunday, 1 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
And we will check in with you next week here and see where we stand with 2 games to go and the Atlanta Falcons coming into town.
Sounds like a plan. It is fun, though. It is fun to talking scenarios and what needs to happen in December for the first time in who knows how long. Let's be honest. So that is fun.
Well, hey, it feels good to not be winning off the field and working about draft position.
Or winning your division with a 7-9 season.
There you go.
That's kind of, that's up there with, what the hell was that? George, thank you.
All right, guys, thanks.
All right, John. Eagles game. They need this. They need this badly. They do not want to have to finish out the last 2 games. Home against Atlanta, that's going to be fighting their guts out, and a Dallas team that's got nothing to play with, loose and easy.
I think, actually, Todd, they have a great opportunity on Sunday against the Eagles because they're the Eagles. They're one of the better teams in the NFC, one of the better teams in the entire NFL. If you can beat them at home, what that does for you emotionally and psychologically, I think that'd be a huge. And based on this, is what wouldn't surprise me somewhat. Although you'd think the Eagles are going to win this. I'm sure Las Vegas is. I don't know what's the spread, probably 4 or 5. But at the same time, if you're a Redskin, I think that they could run the table then. They could actually win, and I don't know what that would do to their playoff, in other words, their position in the playoffs, but I see this team ending up, 12-5, and if they beat the Eagles, when you beat a good team like that late in the season, and that's what makes me think it's possible because they kind of laid an egg in the second half against New Orleans, that I would think that there may be a chance for a larger correction on Sunday.
A redemption.
And I'm going to have to make a correction, and I don't know what it is. Oh, the Commanders. I forgot. I don't know how I forgot that. Anyway, it's El Riggo and Toddy Boy here, and we're out.